Hi, this is James from Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to go over the 1 to 4 player game Faction Battleground. Now, this is going to be a preview of the game, so keep in mind that the components and artwork and potentially rules could change. So let's go ahead down to the table here, and I'll give you a brief overview of the game, and we'll come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, so we're going to go over Faction Battlegrounds. Now, keep in mind again, this is the prototype. So anything in here, the components, the art, and that's all subject to change. In the prototype, there's just the 4 of the 8 factions in there. And we're just going to go over the 2-player rules for the game. And again, this is just an overview. The rules may be tweaked during the Kickstarter campaign or afterwards, depending. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and get started. So, Faction Battlegrounds is a multiplayer fantasy combat board game representing a diverse cultures and mythologies. Players will take on the role of warring generals to command units, manage resources, and cast spells to score enough victory points to win. Now, the objective of this game is just simply to get 25 points. And you're going to do that throughout the game by eliminating your opponent's units, and you gain the points equal to the gold value on the unit. Okay, so yeah, the first person 25 points wins, like I said. And if you look at these different units here, you'll notice this value up here with a little picture of the gold nugget. That is how much it costs to deploy, but it also is the victory points you'll get for the opponent defeating this, or the opponent gets for defeating this unit. And I just wanted to briefly go over some of the factions and their abilities. So let's go ahead and go over what is on each of these cards and what they mean, and then I'll go over some of the factions here. Okay, so let's go over some of these units. So like this unit here, we're going to know some cool things about this unit. So this unit here will cost 3 to put out, has a rank of 2, and the higher ranks will be going first in the game. So you're going to go in turn order, and the units with the highest rank will go, and then next and next and next, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a little bit. But another cool thing on the Pegasus is that he has a movement of 3, but he also can fly, which we're going to go over that ability during some of the gameplay explanation. And then he also has damage of 1, and he has a health of 1. Another cool attribute that these can have is the units in your home territory can also generate either mana or gold. This one here with the little mana symbol will generate mana, where this infiltrator will actually generate gold for you. Another cool resource that you can use in this game is some of them are able to command other units. And let me get you a little picture of one of them. So this unit right here, this is the command symbol. This unit here will be able to command other units of either equal rank or lower rank. And we're going to go over a little bit more of what happens with that in a minute. But know that that ability is on there, and you have a couple units with that ability in each faction. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over a couple of the neat abilities. Like some of them have the ability to use magic. So down here, what this means is this is the amount of mana that you're going to have to spend in order to perform it. This is the range, how the distance it can go to hit an enemy, and this is the amount of damage it does. We're going to go over ranged attacks in a little bit, but notice that this is available on some of the units. Will let you basically do range damage. Now there's also general range damage, which is not magic. This one here, this archer will allow you to fire up to 2 spaces away and can do up to 2 damage. And again, we'll go over what we need to do for ranged attacks and combats in a minute, but just know these are what the different icons are on the cards. And let's go ahead and go to the setup of the game. Okay, so what we're going to do now is when you start the game, you're going to pick a faction. Now in the base game here, you get 8 factions, but with the prototype, we have 4. So you can pick one of the 4 different factions, and they all have different abilities. There's going to be a lot of asymmetric powers, if you notice, between them, and some of the more complicated ones actually have keys to victory here, so they'll explain like a little bit of a strategy that you want to take with them. I think and remember again that these are prototypes, so these little key strategy things might be on all of them in the end. And also keep in mind this is just 4 of the 8. But you're going to pick a faction, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the faction cards that are in each one, and this is just going to be a brief glimpse. And again, this is a prototype, so they can change, and you can pause the video if you want to take a better look at some of them. But the first faction we have of the 4 is the Zion faction, and the Zion faction utilizes your captains to command and coordinate attacks against stronger enemies. You can take advantages of defensive boosts like phalanx and bolster, which we'll explain, to withstand damage. You can use your Valkyries and Angels as aerial units to avoid spells, and speed across the battlefield to land and attack unexpected opponents. So that's Zion. That's basically the idea of what you want to do with that faction. You can mix it up a little bit. There's a lot of variability on what you're going to do for your starting units, and the terrain's going to also potentially change your strategy, but that is what you want to go off of. The next one's Zermano faction. The Zermano faction blast your enemies from across the battleground, and spells like Lightning Bolt and Ice Missile, or devastate multiple foes with magic effects like Blizzard or Laser Blast. You can keep a speed unit handy to claim a mana pool or gold mine to keep the spells coming. This unit is all, or this faction is all going to be about speed and just slinging spells all over the place. So this is actually probably going to be the one that I'm going to like the most. It was pretty good, so we'll see. Got to get a couple more plays in of it, but I like that faction. The next one, and I also like this one too. The next one is the Doomsand faction. This guy has a lot of bigger animals with it, so you can do some, like, you can have some pretty heavy hitting units that go out for the Doomsand one. Like, let me show you one here that I really like. Like, you get like a Wyvern, which is really cool, giant, you can do tons of damage. And you have like the Battle Elephant, which is really cool. So this one here, oh, and the Saber-Tooth Worm. So this faction I like a lot, because actually I pretty much like all these factions, but this faction has some of the big monsters in it, which makes it really cool. The next one's the Prada faction. This one here is going to be interesting in a couple different ways. This one has, I believe, at least in the prototype, has the most ranged units available. So you're going to have a lot of ability to fight from a distance and be able to pick off the enemies before they get to you. So you're going to have to, with this faction, you're going to try to force them to fight in the forests. The tree folk with Prada can anchor the front line and prove challenging to eliminate, and then your ranged forces can start to try to pick them off while you make a battle line sort of thing. The ranged attacks in the Prada are the best out of all the factions. So with that, the tanks that you can put up there to block them off, and you can use the ranged units to pick off the other units. That's really what you're going to do with this faction. Okay, so the next thing after you pick your faction, you'll also notice that each of the factions have specific terrains that are available to them to give them advantages. So you can see the faction symbol in the middle of them, and each of them are going to have 5 different tiles that you're going to be able to use to help build up your terrain for the beginning portion of the game. Now, what you're going to do to start off is each player is going to, and again, we're just going to show the 2-player setup for this game. So of the 2 players, they're each going to roll a die, a 6-sided die, and the person with the highest number will go first. And they will, well, actually, they get to pick which advantage they're going to use. So you can either pick a terrain tile advantage or a resource advantage. So if you get the terrain tile advantage. This is going to allow you to place the first terrain tile, and you will also get to place all 5 of your terrain tiles, where your opponent's only going to be able to place 4 terrain tiles. So it's a good advantage. But if you pick the terrain tile advantage, your opponent will get the resource advantage, or vice versa. The resource advantage allows you to place the resource centers on the battleground, which is going to be important for being able to generate resources throughout the game to power your different units, purchase new units to go out in the battlefield, and all that fun stuff. The person that gets the terrain tile advantage, it becomes the first player. Now, the second player gets 2 distinct advantages. The advantages that the second player is going to get is they're going to be able to place out the resources on the board, which I'm going to show you in a second, and they get to wait to purchase their units until the first player does, so they can play around that a little bit. Okay, so starting with the first player who had the terrain advantage, you're going to go through your factions terrain. So I'm going to play as Doom Sand, and the opponent is going to play as, let's say, Zermano. So we're going to have these 2 factions. And what we're going to do, and Zermano is the first player, and they're going to go first. So they're going to look through the tiles that they have available to place out, which they have 5 different tiles, and I'm only going to get 4. And with the Zermano, you're going to notice there's a lot of water tiles in it. So one very important in island tiles, and one very important thing is if you're looking at the board here, these are the places where your units come in. So for me on this side, this is the 2 places my units can come in on, and for the opponent, these are the 2 places that their units can come in. And because of that, one of the placement rules for the game is that you cannot have water tiles on the spaces where your units come in. So now the first player can put a tile anywhere, he or she. And you may sometimes want to go past your home territory and place them in this area to try to block them in or make it difficult. So I could, like I said, I could place this guy here to try to make it a little rougher for the opponent to get in, or myself in this case. And then I can place the tile anywhere on this board with, again, the restrictions that the water spaces can't be on the places you can come in on, which is just here for me again and here for the opponent. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the board with the tiles, and then we'll move from there. All right, now that the territory tiles have been placed out, the second player is going to pick where the resource centers go on the board. And there's a couple different rules for placement of the resource centers. So if I place, let's say I place a mana generating one here, I'm gonna have to place a gold generating one diagonally from it. Also, I can't place the next one. It has to be placed at least 2 spaces away. So the next one could be placed here, and this one can be placed here. And that is basically the gist of how to place out the mana generating centers. Once that's out, then we can go ahead and start by selecting our starting units. So for selecting your starting units, you're going to be able to start off with 10 gold and 10 mana. You're going to use the gold to select your units, but you're going to use a player board like this to be able to keep track of it. So you can use the cubes there to mark where on the board each of your resource generating and or victory points is at. And again, remember, once you hit 25 victory points, you win. So let's go ahead, and what you're going to do is you have, again, 10 gold, and you're going to get to go through your cards and pick how much you want to spend on units, starting units. Opponent who's playing Zermano took the territory benefit. They have to select their units first. So they're just going to go through, and you can see that gold cost on here. And again, the double-edged sword with this gold cost stuff is these are also the victory points your opponent's going to get for defeating these units. So they're going to go through, and they have up to 10 gold to purchase these. And the difference will actually remain in their supply, so they can use that in the future. So let's say my opponent wants to get some higher ranking ones out there. Maybe this unit here have at least one of them with command, so they can run a smaller unit if they need to. So that would cost them 5 gold. And let's say they also want to have let's say where they want to also have a unit that can generate some gold. So again, this determines what they generate. This one will generate mana. This one will generate gold. You can also notice the speeds of each on here. So I may want to have this unit out so I can get him out really quick. But the downfall to him is that he has flight, but he also has low combat damage. So there's some advantage to this and disadvantage to each of the units, so you have to balance them out. But the cool thing about him also is he is immune to range attacks. So, and there's a special thing with flying too, we'll go over in a minute. But let's say an opponent, he or she has picked these 2 units to start off with. And I'm going to set them aside here right now. So they pick those 2 units. And now seeing what they have picked, I'm going to go through and pick my units. And I also have the same 10 gold. And I can say, well, you know, they're going to go with a little bit of speed. So what do I want to do? And I'm thinking that I don't want to pay for him right away, because he'd be my only unit for right now. I'm thinking I want to be able to take some damage and maybe probably, yeah, I want to be able to, I want to take some damage, and I also want to be able to maneuver around and do some stuff. So I might actually do like a lower flying unit potentially. And you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to get 3 units. So I'm going to go ahead and get all 3 of these. So I have a heavy artillery or heavy unit, and then I have some 2 lighter ones to try to balance it out a little bit. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and place our starting units in our base camp, which is these starting locations. So I place them out. And now the setup has finished, and we're going to go ahead and start the game with the first player, which is my opponent, which is Zermano. And we're going to go over just a couple brief things you can do during the game. So to start off with, the units with the highest rank go first. So in this case, I have a couple 4s and a 2, and my opponent has a 5, which is the highest rank, and this one will be able to go first. And again, this one has the command ability, so this one can actually make a unit of equal to or lower rank go instead of them. And we're not going to do that quite yet, but just know that ability is there, so you can do a lot of really sneaky things. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the movement here. And this is the amount of movement that you can do. However, what's cool is for a general rule, just you can go forward, backward, or side to side. But in your home territory, you're able to go diagonally. So I can move my unit all the way over here, and that is legal. And that'll be my starting move, to move them over there. Actually, I don't think that's a great starting movement. So maybe I'm going to just switch to here so we can get some stuff going here. There's a lot of strategy in the movement on here. I'm probably not making the best decisions in the world, but this is just to give you an idea how to play the game. So a couple things you want to be aware of for movement, other than that cool diagonal thing you can do in your home territory. Once we get over to your opponent's territory on there, you can't. Is that you can actually move less. So if I wanted to, it has a movement of 2 and I just wanted to move 1, that's okay. I can do that. Movement units can't move through each other, so I can't move this unit like that. It just can't go through that unit. So that unit would be in my way. And the other neat thing that you could potentially do is activating a unit does not mean that you have to actually move the unit. Once a unit has activated and finished its movement, you're going to put one of these tokens on it just to denote that it's done, it's completed. This is important too because of commanders being able to make other units move out of rank order, potentially. So that's important. And you're going to go back and forth and you're going to move all your units. So if you are a commander and you do decide to activate your command token, if you do actually make a command, then you can place this command token on your unit to indicate that you've used that command ability. All right, the next thing that is very important in the game is you can recruit new units. And you can do this at 1 to 2 times. Players can recruit units when one of the units is going to activate. So let's say when this guy is going to activate, I can recruit a new unit. When I do that, I have to recruit that unit before that unit activates. And you can recruit multiple units, which is really cool. Do it, and you're going to spend, when you're recruiting the units, again, you got to spend that gold cost on the top, and you have to have the resource to do it. So that is basically the requirements for it. The second time you can do it is during the reinforcement phase, after all units have activated. So after everything is activated, you can recruit some more units. And anytime you have units coming on, they are all placed in your base camp location. And again, that's another reason why you can't have your oceans there, because it would be really bad if you recruited them into that water and then they have movement restrictions and all sorts of fun stuff for that. Okay, so after everything is gone, one of the last things you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to generate resources. So in your home territories, your units can generate you resources, and they're shown up on here. So in my home territories, like this one here will generate 2 mana because it's in my home territory areas. And if it's outside an enemy territories, it won't generate anything. You can also get additional resources for controlling these resource centers. So you can get gold here and mana here. So you're going to gather all that up. You're going to adjust your counts on there. And then you're going to remove all the tokens on your different units. So your activation tokens are going to get removed. Now, a couple different things to get into the meat of the game now is that's just basically a very quick overview of the turns. But to claim a resource center, your unit has to be on top of it. So your unit needs to remain on it, and then it can be claimed. And once you move off of it, you still have it claimed. So you can move on to it and then move off later, and you're still going to get the benefit from it unless your opponent takes it. So, and each of these resource centers are going to generate you 2 of those resources, like these units when they're in your home territory. So 2 gold or 2 mana, depending on the one you took. And another thing that's important to remember is no matter what, you're going to earn 1 of each resource every round, no matter what. So even if you don't have any resource generation anywhere, you're still going to get some from it. However, if you notice, like my giant 9 worm, you're going to want to get some resources to be able to get these guys out, and you're also going to be wanting to get some more resources if you use a lot of magic, or you have units out that use magic. Like if I had this one out here, I'm going to want it. That's 6 mana. So I need to be able to do that. And you can only fire these off once per round, but still, 6 mana, it'd be a long time if you didn't gain resource centers to get it. Now we can go on to the cool part of the game, which is my favorite, but there's a lot of cool parts to the game. But this part is going to be your combat. So there's going to be melee, range, and spell, and aerial combat. There's going to be your 4 different types of combat. Now, we went over a little bit where I just said that these guys have flight. However, they have to either be actively up or down. when a unit is flying, it can't be attacked by melee combat, which is really useful, but it still can be hit by ranged combat. And these guys can perform ranged combat, but they can't perform melee combat unless they're on the ground. So when they land, they're landed for the round, for the rest of the round. And when they take off, they're up. So it's a strategic thing that you can think of where you can fly across the board, be slightly immune from the other units there, especially if they're all melee. Then you don't need to worry about them too much if you're up in the air. So you can make it across the board a little bit safer. So there's a lot to these guys, but just keep that in mind that they, when they're up in the air, they're going to have this little fight token on them, so you know. And when on the ground, they are in trouble of melee attacks. That was one of the things that makes this Griffin really cool, by the way, is because he's immune to ranged attacks. So when he's up in the air, he's doing pretty good. So ranged attacks. Do I have a ranged attack one out here? I'll just grab one. So with ranged attacks, this is going, again, this is the distance that it can go. So this unit, let's say it's here, it can shoot 2 spaces away and hit this unit. And this is, again, the amount of damage that it can do. So it can move, it can shoot across grids. It can also shoot diagonally. But the rules for the diagonally is it first has to shoot like horizontally, then diagonally, or vertically, and then diagonally. It can't just be diagonal first. So keep that in mind for the ranged units themselves. Melee attacks are very straightforward. They're just going to be the amount that's on here. And again, if you take damage, which there's the damage counters in the game here. So these damage counters. If you take damage equal to or greater than the health of the unit is destroyed, and the opponent gains the victory points equal to the gold value of that unit. Spells function similar to ranged attacks. A unit can only cast 1 spell per round again, so you got 1 shot at it. You have to spend the mana required to cast a spell. So this one here again is going to be 6 to be able to cast it, 2 for range, and this one is pretty damaging. It can do 5 damage, and it also lets you divide the damage up too. So that is really powerful, but it does cost a lot of mana. So you're probably going to have a hard time firing this off pretty frequently, and your opponents are probably going to want to kill this guy as quickly as possible. And another thing I wanted to point out is aerial units can actually, they're addendum to the aerial units. An aerial unit can attack another aerial unit when they're in the air. So that's one thing to keep in mind. They also can't claim resource centers unless they have landed. So if I'm flying over this, and I'm flying in the air, I can't claim it until I actually land down, which would make me more susceptible to melee attacks. So this is just a super brief overview of the game. This is an idea of how it gets set up, how your units get moved, basic idea of combat. The meat of the game, again, is going to be knowing your pool of available units in your faction and what they do. So, like I said earlier, the keys to victory on the cards really help out a lot. You want to pay attention to these, especially in your first couple games. They're going to help you out, and they're going to tell you that you can look at your special faction abilities, which each one's going to have unique ones, and you can play, I would say probably want to play a faction multiple times to get the hang of it and learn these cards really well. And your keys to victory are going to be strategically determining what units you're going to bring out versus what units your opponent brought out versus the terrain that's available and how you're going to be able to deal with it. So let's go ahead back up to the table. I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the game. Faction Battlegrounds. I just wanted to start off by saying this is not a paid review. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't a paid review, and if we ever do have a paid review, it'll be in the beginning of the video and we'll do it as a disclaimer, just because I like this game a lot and I didn't want my opinion to be considered diluted from being paid content. So Faction Battlegrounds, I like it a lot. I love tactical style games, and I love the card-based format for like miniatures style games, because not only can you have like more variability, it's easier to get into, I don't have to paint those miniatures or anything, but I still get the feel. And the cool thing about this game is, unlike some other games that I played, is it feels like it is more strategic, meaning with a couple of the other games you play, you would draw cards and you're going to be able to place those cards out on the battlefield at different times. This one here, you know what you have. You have your factions units. You know what all of them are. You know what all the abilities are. You can strategically place out the terrain in the beginning or react to the other player placing out their terrain to give you a strategic advantage. The terrain placement makes every single game different. Playing different factions gives them different terrain, so those games are all different. There's a lot of variability in this game, yet keeping all the strategic elements in the game. I love this game. I love playing all the different factions. I think it's a game that you will play a faction multiple times to get used to how it's played and be very efficient on it, but that yet say, well, that faction looks cool too, I want to try that one. So I can't recommend this game enough. I love it. It's great. Even with the prototype, I can't imagine what more is going to be in the new ones to make it awesome. The 4 faction unit groups that I got were amazing. Having up to 8 would be so much replayability in this game. It's just awesome. So other than I really like this game, I really like the design, I really like how the factions are laid out, I really like the units, I really like the different abilities, I really like the different things that you can do in the game. I really like the fact that it's easy to know what your opponent can do versus what you can do. You can just look at those units, they're laid out and the art is out in a way that I can easily see across from the board what the different stats of the units are. I will also say the art on this game is amazing. I love it. I think that it really shows that cultural diversity can add more to a game. It actually makes the world seem more in depth and more rich with that. I will also say, as a father of 5 daughters, I do really appreciate that I can play this game and the women are depicted in a respectful manner. They are more realistic fighters and all that fun stuff. So just for a multitude of reasons, I highly, again, recommend Faction Battleground. This will be a game that I am going to be playing for a very long time. I'm pretty sure it's going to be getting table a lot. I know my daughters will love it when they get back from college and play it. It's just going to be potentially one of my top 10 games. So that was Factions Battleground. Thank you for watching.